let's talk about leaking O-rings, leaking seals, gaskets, whatever you want to call them. So this was from the vehicle yesterday that I did a video on that developed a leak, and it's on this 2017 Jetta. So here we go, 2017 Jetta. This is the condenser, and it is the original. This is not an aftermarket replacement. All they were doing was disconnecting refrigerant lines so they could move stuff out of the way to replace some parts, and then all they did was reconnect the refrigerant lines. The problem was they did reuse the gaskets. These are not them. This is what the dealer sent out, and they were wrong. And then when talking to the dealer they normally deal with on Volkswagen, they did not even know that these kind of gaskets exist. They only knew about these. So they called another dealership, because he called me back up saying they're having a problem getting these gaskets. They don't show. I told him, you know, it's just that parts person doesn't know how to look up or cross-reference, or doesn't know how to look at the asterisk for little fine detail notes. So they called up another dealer, and the other dealer said the same thing. This is what comes with it. But then he says, oh yeah, we have done there's a little footnote at the bottom of the selection when getting gasket seals for this particular condenser. Let me show you the part numbers. Some of you guys are Volkswagen aficionados who might know this very well. And this particular condenser had an option with these fittings, and so this is what's needed. And the dealership local here did not have these metal seal washers with the gaskets. GM uses these, other manufacturer uses these, but the other dealership like 30 miles away did, and they had to ship these here. Now this is the next day, so that means this customer was supposed to be delivered a couple days ago. But the night it was supposed to be delivered, when I made the video and I finished this air conditioning and it was to go off to the customer, while they were driving it in the shop, it developed a leak. And it was literally, if you look at the last video I made on this, it was literally pissing on the floor, green dye and oil all over the place. And it was a leak that only leaked when it was full and only at a certain temperature and pressure, and then the leak totally stopped. So looking at these O-rings specifically, even if I put this on micro and you try to look at there is no imperfections. There is absolutely nothing wrong with these O-rings. There's not a groove, a nick. There's nothing wrong with these seals, but there is something wrong with them. They were reused, and that was the number one mistake. Just because something looks good doesn't mean it's going to work a second time. And there's a elasticity. And there's another word I can't remember. When you study and you get into some of the engineering classes, and when you get into materials classes that teach you about specific materials and what to use, what not to use, why you don't reuse things, there's a spring compression that comes with elastomers, including head gaskets and stuff like that. And they could spring once, but they weren't meant to do it a second time, especially after they go through hot and cold cycles, which condensers go through hot and cold cycles, a lot of them. So they finally got the new ones. They put them on there. I'm about to do a recharge on this unit again. And, it was a big hassle. It actually, look at now, the customer's been without their car delivered for 3 days now. And imagine the customer's in a rental car, or if you're unfortunate enough you're a shop and this is a direct repair, and it's kind of like a black eye on your scorecard that you were not able to deliver a car on time because an O-ring leaked. And the only reason the O-ring leaked is because it was reused, and it was never should be reused in the first place. Every time someone asks me, oh, but we get away with it most of the time, or it usually doesn't leak, it works most of the time, whatever the excuse is. That's right. Read those words really. Most of the time it works when you reuse them. But what about that one time when it doesn't work? Because of these $5, $7, whatever they cost, it doesn't matter. I guess a customer has to be in a rental car for 2 or 3 extra days. It has to take up shop space. And if you count, every stall that a car sits in is money. And if you're 120, 150, $200 an hour because of an O-ring, and you have to pull a technician, all this had to come apart again because of reusing these little cheap parts that are supposed to be replaced every time. But it is. Nobody wants to go through the hassle of looking up these part numbers, especially when they're hard ones. They're not hard, just lack of knowing what items are. And this includes Chevy dealerships, Ford dealerships, Toyota dealerships. There's so many new parts guys working in parts houses in the last decade that they don't even know what they're selling. I go to the computer, I look it up, it spits me out a part number, I send it out. They don't even know what's in their hand is the right item or not. They look at a picture on a screen and it says this is what it should be, but because they never came from the trades like guys used to 30, 40, 60 years ago, they came from the trade and became, maybe they messed up their arms or their back or something and they become a parts guy. Or they were a mechanic and they moved into a dealership, but they didn't want to become a grease monkey anymore and work, so they become a parts guy. They have an actual understanding. They know what every part in their hand is. Those guys almost don't exist anymore, and that's the problem with this trade. This is a big blunder F, because first, this should not have been used in the first place, and this happens to me all the time in shops all over the Bay Area here. And when you tell people, every time I have to say that, I go, these are supposed to be replaced every time. They go, oh, I didn't know that. I go, how many decades have you been in this business and you didn't know that? And this happens. Well, it doesn't, it's an arbitration number. It doesn't happen enough, so it's not worth it, kind of thing. But when it happens, it really gets noticed. And like many things, whether it's transmissions, power steering, the brake system, something like that, there's many who learn by it breaks, therefore I'm learning. No, this is stuff that you were taught when you were taking courses. Oh, wait a minute. Almost nobody takes courses. They learn by watching somebody else who broke a whole bunch of things to learn by breaking more things. It's just a mentality in a lot of service sectors, and automotive is not the only ones who do this. But it gets back to always replace your O-rings. And I just ask guys, do you reuse head gaskets when rebuilding an engine? Then what made you think you could do this? That's all. All right, guys, that's my little piece of advice there, little words of wisdom. Do not reuse O-rings or gaskets, washers, or any other device in the sealing system unless you can afford to come back and maybe a black eye on your reputation, because for this little itty bitty tiny inexpensive part, a big ordeal happens. See you guys on the next one. Adios.